We're really lucky here in Mobile because we're in Zone 8B. We're almost kind of semi-tropical. So unless we have a really severe winter, we have color throughout the gardens 365 days of the year, and winter is no exception.
In the middle of winter for many of us, there is a place where I can truly say that spring's eternal.
Oh, heavens, yes, it's a world-class place. I said something about how beautiful it was today at choir practice at work, and she kind of laughed sheepishly and said, you know, I've never been to Bellingrath. And I thought, well, you ought to be ashamed. You know, that's just terrible.
We have camellias, which was Mr. Bellingrath's favorite plant, so there are lots of old camellias throughout the gardens. But then we have production greenhouses that we raise all sorts of winter hardy crops that we plant throughout the gardens. In some cases it looks like a salad bowl because we've got ornamental kale and mustards that are ornamental, multicolored, and Swiss chard and parsley, things that are cold hardy, but a whole host of other things that we can grow in our climate. Unless we get into the low 20s or teens, all of those crops will survive our Mobile winters.
Welcome to Bellingrath Gardens and Home, a place where Mother Nature's beauty is always in bloom, with a little help from her friends.
I started in June of 2012. It was probably 105 that day. And as you'll notice, there's not any sun in this little area, and I thought, I'm gonna have a heat stroke and die. But I absolutely fell in love with this place immediately. How could you not? On its worst day, it's just fabulous.
It's one of the older gardens in our country. It was first opened in 1935. So most of our public gardens that are city gardens didn't start until the 50s and 60s, in some cases even the 80s or 90s. It's one of Alabama's treasures. It's actually one of the oldest cultural institutions in our state, and we have the privilege of taking care of Mr. and Mrs. Bellingrath's garden.
But it's more than just the gardens which draw visitors to the southern tip of Mobile County.
Now, Mr. Bellingrath was one of the first 10 Coca-Cola bottlers, and he bought the franchise in 1903 for $1,500. And he hired his secretary, Bessie Mae Morris, and she was a native Mobilian, and they fell in love pretty quick. Of course, he was a very wealthy man, and they made their fortune together, but since neither one of them came from wealth, they were humble in their beginnings, and they shared their wealth with the public. And the doctor that was taking care of Mr. Bellingrath told him, he said, you've turned into quite a workaholic. You need to relax and go out there and buy that old fishing camp that's on Fowl River. You could only get here by boat, so it was really secluded and nestled in just the middle of Spanish moss and huge oak trees, and they loved it. And so they bought this fishing camp, and Mrs. Bellingrath had some great ideas. She said, I think I could plant some flowers here. So she did. And then they decided, well, we probably need to live here because we come out here all the time. And so they built their home here in 1935. And there's people that actually travel here from all over the world, and they find this little place nestled in sort of the woods in a country garden. And you know, when the Bellingraths lived here and they were proud of the gardens, they opened up the gardens to the public, and they offered people to walk through the gardens each day as they lived here in this beautiful home. And so what we have today is people still visiting the gardens, and then they come in and they see the beautiful home, and then they just want to come back every year. It feels like you're working in heaven, as I describe it often, because when you come here, there's a great spirit here. So we want to make sure that there's something always blooming in the gardens, and there's always something to see and enjoy any time of the year that you come.
In the 1930s, Walter Bellingrath was told by his doctor he needed to get away from the pressures of his job in Mobile, and he came here. And along the banks of the Fowl River, he built a garden and then a home, which would become a state treasure, one of the most relaxing places I've ever been, and absolutely Alabama.